Breakfast with Adam Spencer.
Now, it might have got lost in the news for you yesterday with the Rugby Union World Cup final and the like, but the protesters, the Occupy Sydney protest movement, have been forcibly evicted from Martin Place yesterday morning. There are some conflicting claims about the nature of the eviction, its authority and the like. So we're going to talk soon with Mark Murdoch, Assistant Police Commissioner. Love to hear your thoughts. 1 300 222 702. The protesters have been there for several days, staying 24 hours around the day. Was it a valid protest? Was it a great expression of democracy? Or was it a bit rich, people expecting to be able to occupy Martin Place for that length of time, including overnight? 1 300 222 702 is our number if you'd like to share your thoughts. Mark Murdoch is Assistant Police Commissioner. He joins us now. Mr Murdoch, thanks for your time.
Good morning, Adam.
You have praised the officers' exemplary professionalism. Let's walk through what happened. When were people evicted?
About shortly before 5 a.m. yesterday morning, Adam, we took action to remove people who had occupied Martin Place for the last 8 days.
How many police officers were involved in the eviction?
We had about 120 on the ground over the course of the morning, performing a number of different roles, and those police were our general duty police and our specialist support people.
At the time of the Melbourne eviction, I saw police on horseback. Were there police on horseback in Sydney?
No, we didn't use our horses yesterday. We didn't have a need to.
How many protesters were evicted from? How many people were there at Martin Place when the police arrived?
Well, our count was somewhere between 50 and 60. We ended up arresting 40 of that number, and they were arrested because they refused to comply with our warnings to move and leave the area.
24 hours on, how many of those 40 people have been charged or released? Do you have any numbers on that?
Yes, all but 40 action has been taken against in various forms. Some were charged, some were dealt with by other means. One remains in custody this morning, a woman, but she remains in custody as a consequence of her own choice, in that she won't sign her bail undertaking, so she remains in custody until such time as she does.
Who decided to remove the protesters, Assistant Commissioner?
Myself, Adam.
What did you base that decision upon?
The protest commenced on Saturday the 15th of October. The protest group had permission to conduct a lawful public assembly in Martin Place between 2:30 and 4:30 on that day. Any time after 4:30 p.m, their lawful authority to engage in a public assembly and promote their protest had expired. They had no protection under the Summary Offences Act to continue. We, the New South Wales Police, for a variety of reasons, exercised our discretion for a couple of days to allow them to remain and continue. No matter the issue for us is irrelevant, Adam. It was a matter of allowing people to have a fair go. We were engaged with them the whole time. They were peaceful. They were relatively compliant, notwithstanding they refused to leave Martin Place. But in my mind, there was absolutely no reason to create an issue larger than it needed to be at the particular time.
You said that on the 15th at 4:30 p.m. their lawful assembly permission expired. Once that expires, what rule or law are they breaking in being there?
Summary Offences Act. Sections of the Summary Offences Act give them some protections about lawful public assembly. They had, once that time frame had expired, those protections lapsed. They then needed to fall and apply back with the law as it applies to everyone else on a day-to-day basis. Again, we exercised our discretion, as I just said before, because by and large, we could let them remain and people could still transit Martin Place, if you like, in a relatively free and unobstructed manner. However, that did not remain over the course of the days. Wednesday, as you know, ourselves and the City of Sydney Council engaged the protest group and tried to reach a compromise which was suitable to both sides. That compromise was not able to be achieved. We knew they were rallying again on Saturday. Again, we exercised our discretion. and trying to be as fair as we possibly could to allow these people to get their message across. We continually warned them they were in breach of the law. We continually warned them they had to move. They continually rejected that advice. The matter just had to come to a conclusion at some point, Adam. To maintain the status quo was clearly untenable. That space is there for all of Sydney to use, not just a very small group. And Sunday morning, I made the decision that we would remove the people forcibly if they chose to not move themselves.
I'm talking with Assistant Commissioner Mark Murdoch. Our lines are open, 1300 222 702. If you'd like to give us a call, do you agree with what's happened? Do you agree with the right of the protesters to have gathered there? Was it right of the police to move them on? When it comes to their being moved on, Assistant Commissioner, one quote from one of the protesters: "I saw bloody noses, I saw police throwing punches, and I myself was put into a wrist lock like I have never experienced before. I was screaming in pain." Are they an accurate depiction of what took place yesterday morning?
Yes, that would be accurate, but Adam, those things occurred as a direct consequence of the resistance of the protesters. The police did not initiate any violence or forcible behaviour until they were left with no other option.
But the police did punch protesters?
I'm not saying they punched protesters. If protesters were punched, it would have been in self-defence. I saw on CCTV myself a number of punches being thrown at police officers, and I don't think we should lose sight of the fact either, Adam, that at 6:30pm the day before, the Saturday afternoon the day before, two of my police were assaulted, unprovoked assault. One was hit in the side of the head with a mag-light torch, which is akin to being hit in the head with a baton. My police didn't ask for that. They were down there doing a job, engaging the protesters, and that's what occurred. Now, those two people who assaulted the police were arrested and they appeared in court yesterday. So we just need to remain a little bit objective in this discussion. A lot of the claims made by the protesters are understandably, they are not happy, and I understand that. But they are to be expected, those sorts of comments. They didn't like to be removed, they wanted to remain, but I can assure the community and your listeners this morning that police only used as much force as was absolutely necessary to ensure compliance and to remove those people from the area in a safe manner.
Can I ask, Assistant Commissioner, have you read the claims this morning by the Lord Mayor of Sydney, Clover Moore, who said the police had made an inaccurate interpretation of the law, in particular references to council ordinances or bylaws that were being infringed and permitted the removal of the protesters? Have you read those reports, and was there any misunderstanding of the authorities that were appropriate?
I haven't read those reports this morning, but I would just say to that my interpretation of the law is clearly different to the Lord Mayor's.
Mm-hmm. And why would this be done? For what operational reason would you do something like this at dawn? I mean, the images I've seen, it's still quite dark. Does that make it particularly easier or less likely to be confusing and hectic if it's done under the cover of darkness?
Look, the cover of darkness line is a bit of a bodgy one in my view. We did that at the time.
You said it began at 5 a.m. and the sun would have got up at about 10:06 or so. So it certainly would have been dark.
Oh, it was certainly dark, Adam, and that was a deliberate tactical strategy that we employed. We went in at that particular time for a number of reasons, primarily for public safety. In that 5 a.m. Martin Place is fairly devoid of people at that time, so we're going to inconvenience as least possible people as possible. No person, or the least number of people and members of the community, are put at risk if we need to engage the protesters, as ultimately did happen. We needed to close down a number of streets in the area to allow a safe footprint for our police and the protesters to move about. So we're mindful of. We're again mindful of not inconveniencing motorists and other road users in the area, and it also allowed us to try and wrap the event up as quickly as possible, open Martin Place, and return it to business as usual for people before they got up and went about their business. So for all those reasons, that's why we chose 5 a.m.
Okay, thank you very much, Assistant Commissioner. I'm talking to a couple of the protesters after 7 o'clock. Do you have any message for them or their fellow Occupy Sydney members this morning?
As I said before, the issue is irrelevant for us. We facilitate around 500 protests in the city every year. people want to abide by the law, engage in lawful, peaceful protest, we will support their democratic right to do so every day of the week. Those who want to operate outside that footprint, well, we'll take action as necessary.
Much appreciated. Thanks for your time this morning, Assistant Commissioner. Assistant Commissioner Mark Murdoch there, his side of the story, what happened at yesterday's eviction of the Occupy Sydney protesters. We'll talk with the protesters after 7 o'clock. Bruce, what are your thoughts?
I'm commending the police for their actions. I think the protesters did the right thing and got the correct permission to stage their protest, but they were given an ample opportunity to do that. Mm-hmm. They wouldn't leave, and they gave the police no option but to remove them. And if there's any force, I think it's the protesters' blame. And I think it's sad that you're in a situation where you're making out the police are at fault. I think it's a reflection on society today that these sort of people can do this sort of thing and not obey the law.
Okay, Bruce, apologies if you have interpreted anything I said as suggesting the police are at fault. I was simply getting the facts as to what happened yesterday morning. But thank you very much for your call, Bruce.
Thank you.
Leon, what would you like to say?
I'm an old bugger. I'm in my 70s, but something I learned a long time ago, Adam. Freedom ends at the point of the other fellow's nose. And these people, if they want to demonstrate, and people have demonstrated many times myself, but as for trying to set up shop in Marston Place, camp there, etc., they're past the point of the other fellow's nose. And as for what that last comment said about you, I would agree with him. You are certainly coming across as somebody who is anti-police. But you know that enough. Bye-bye.
Apologies, Leon. Thanks a lot for your time. 13 past 7.
On 7:02 ABC Sydney, Breakfast with Adam Spencer.
Yes, a police action at dawn yesterday has seen the Occupy Sydney protesters removed from Martin Place. To get their side of the story and work out where to now for the Occupy Sydney movement, we've got Mark Goodcamp, one of the organisers of Occupy Sydney, and Winnie Teresa, one of the protesters who was evicted yesterday morning, on the line. Winnie, I'll start with you. What was your experience yesterday morning? What happened?
Good morning, Adam. Well, I was there. I was woken up at 5 a.m. By police coming onto the occupation site and ordering us to move on. We were given about 5 to 10 minutes to leave. So obviously at that time of the morning, in the middle of sleeping, we were all quite confused about what was going on, starting to figure out what to do, grab some warm clothes for the cold morning. But what I experienced was the police very quickly moving onto the occupation site, removing sleeping bags, starting to remove people in quite a forceful way, quite a heavy-handed way. And certainly I myself saw a police officer hit a protester in the face. He had a bloody nose. I wasn't sure what was happening. It was all just, I experienced quite a forceful eviction that was very upsetting and very disturbing.
Assistant Commissioner Mark Murdoch said before 7 o'clock he would only imagine a police officer would have hit someone if the police officer had been hit or threatened with being hit in the first place. You say you saw a police officer hit someone. Had that person hit or threatened to hit the police officer from your perspective?
Like I say, I was trying to figure out what was happening. I saw the police officer take that action. Certainly didn't see the protester do anything of that kind at all in that manner.
Were you just told to move on? Did you move on peacefully? Were you arrested and charged? What happened in your case, Winnie?
In my case, I actually grabbed a video camera to film what was happening because I could see about 100 police and just streaming on, and I was extremely concerned about the way that the police were approaching us and concerned about my own safety and our collective safety.
And in your case, did you then leave the premises?
I stuck around to film what was happening. I wasn't. I was asked to keep moving back, which I complied with. I wasn't arrested myself, but I certainly was there to witness what was happening with my own eyes, and also to capture that for the world, because it is really important to actually show the public what the police were doing yesterday.
And the police did ask you to move on before they began moving people's belongings and the like?
Like I said, I was woken up to an order by the police to move on, people saying that the police were asking us to move on. It all happened very quickly. I had 5 minutes in which to get out of my sleeping bag, put on some warm clothes, grab a video camera, and suddenly the whole occupation site was being taken down, people were being pushed back, people were being arrested. A lot of people started crying. I was quite upset by what was happening yesterday morning.
Okay, Wendy, I'm going to ask Mark a couple of questions. I'll keep you on the line there because there's something else I want to ask you in a second. Mark, you're one of the organisers of Occupy Sydney. What was your experience at 5 o'clock yesterday morning?
Similar to Wendy, at about 10 to 5, I suddenly heard one of the fellow protesters who'd been sort of keeping watch say, quick, the police are coming. I sort of got up in a fairly groggy state, having had about 3.5 hours sleep. And, most people were, in a similar situation, just coming to their senses, really, when the police ordered us to move on. And, I just don't think it's humanly possible for people to, A, wake up, B, as Wendy said, change clothes, C, gather all their belongings that were at the camp and move on. So basically before we even had a chance to even decide if we were going to move on, that decision was taken for us by the police moving in on us.
Did some protesters resist arrest? There are reports of some protesters linking arms and making it difficult for them to be moved.
People did link arms. I don't think that constitutes resisting arrest. Certainly, there was no sort of physical retaliation on the part of the protesters. You're quite.
You've been involved in many protests before, Mr. Goodcamp. So, what is the point of why do people link arms in a situation like that when they've been asked to move on by police?
I guess it's so that there's a sense of unity amongst people. That.
It's signalling that you're not willing to move yourself, and it's to make it as difficult as possible for police to move you, isn't it?
It would make it more difficult for the police than if we weren't linked. However, I guess it depends on what your definition of resist is. To my mind, resist would entail some kind of physical resistance.
Did any protesters punch or threaten to punch police?
No.
It's alleged one.
Well, what I saw was one way attack. I think it was a premeditated decision to clear us, and I heard Mark Murdoch say that they used reasonable force. I think they went in with an attitude of, by any means necessary, we're going to get these people out of here, and the fact that they chose, as you said, when it was still dark, there was no media cameras around.
Mr. Murdoch said that was for when there's limited access from other members of the public to the area, so it's the safest time to do it, limited vehicular access, etc.
Well, that was 5 o'clock. If you see Martin Place on a Sunday morning, it's pretty quiet till at least about 8:30 or 9 o'clock. It would have been quite easy, I think, for the police to say you've got half an hour to move. That would have given people a chance to think about how we were going to respond, what we were going to do. Frankly, I expected maybe 20 police there, but there were between, I think, 150 and 200 police. And faced with that, we would have had probably no choice but to decide to relocate and discuss what we're going to do. But as it was, there was absolutely no chance for us to have such a discussion.
Assistant Commissioner Murdoch says that at 6:30 on Saturday night, 2 police were assaulted. One of them was hit with a heavy flashlight that he equates to being hit with a baton. And there are also allegations that one police officer's hand was bitten yesterday morning by someone refusing to move on. Are these incidents of, I don't want to talk specifically about the allegations of the hand biting, but are incidents of that sort, and specifically the incident on the Saturday night, accurate?
I didn't actually witness the event on Saturday night. I know there was a conflict between that individual protester and the police, and that's now a matter in the courts. Mm-hmm. But whatever happened between that individual and us, my understanding is that a couple of people were standing on the top of the stairs near Westpac Bank, and asked to move, and then were forcibly removed. Now, obviously there are different individuals in our protest take different forms of sometimes might take decisions into their own hands. And
you wouldn't condone physical activity or violence towards the police in those circumstances, would you, Mark?
What was that, sorry?
You wouldn't condone physical violence or threats towards the police, would you?
I wouldn't.
Can I just ask?
I've seen a photo of the policeman with a cut, and but I feel that if the police are trying to link that incident to what happened to us the next morning, then I think we've been collectively punished for something which is a matter in the courts regarding one individual.
Can I just ask quickly that Assistant Commissioner Murdoch pointed out before 7 o'clock this morning that by yesterday morning your lawful public assembly, that which you had requested, a 2:30 till 4:30 protest on the 15th, had expired 8 days earlier. He claims that during that time, I think he was saying you haven't applied again for any further permission to be there. How long do you feel you can reasonably stay in what's a busy public thoroughfare right in the heart of the city when your permission to do so has expired 8 days earlier?
Well, I guess I would argue that our Occupy site was not actually interfering with passers-by. In fact, the passers-by were overwhelmingly supportive of the cause of the spirit of what we were initially protesting about, and I'd like to be able to talk about that a little bit rather than the police issue. Bank workers coming and throwing $50 into our donation bucket, people just randomly rocking up with blocks of chocolate or bags of oranges or whatever for the protest site. So it's true, Mr. Murdoch said, our Form 1 did expire on Saturday afternoon. However, we did have an altercation on the first night where some of us who pitched tents had those removed. And okay, we said, all right, we're going to do it a bit rougher than what we'd hoped. We're going to be sleeping under the stars like hundreds of thousands of homeless people do in Australia every year.
And you'd been doing that for 8 days, Mark. Can you understand the argument that any reasonable permission you had to be there had expired and it was time to consider moving on?
Well, at some point we would have had to decide, is the Occupy site withering? Is it going to fizzle of its own accord? Or is the level of public sympathy for what we stand for justify us staying there as a sort of a presence for anyone who supports what we were doing to be able to drop in, show their support, and actually try and change a situation where 1% of the population own up more than 20% of the nation's wealth.
Okay, Mark, look, I'll leave it there. Thank you very much for your time this morning. Wendy, can I ask you quickly, you're the media spokesperson for Occupy Sydney. There was a meeting last night. What's the ongoing plan with the organisation?
The Occupy Sydney movement is certainly continuing. People have resolved that what we're doing is extremely important. It's extremely important at this moment in time as well, and certainly we were a little bit puzzled by what happened yesterday, but our goal is to continue. And so there will be a mass rally that we've called for November the 5th.
Will you be getting police permission for that rally like you had initially for this one?
We'll certainly have to make lots of preparations for that one, and so that's a matter that we'll have to, that's something that obviously we'll organise over the next 2 weeks, but we're certainly inviting many members of the community to come down to support that.
Okay, Wendy, look, I'm sure people will hear about that through the appropriate channels. Lovely to speak to you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Wendy Teresa there, one of the protesters from the Occupy Sydney movement. 25 minutes past 7, a couple of quick calls on this. Graham from Normanhurst, your thoughts?
Oh, good day, Adam. Both of the protesters you've interviewed have mentioned moving on and being told to move on. What part of a couple of days' worth of being told to move on by police don't they understand?
Okay, Ian, what would you like to say?
Look, I'd just love to know who in the council requested for the police to move in.
Clover Moore has said that the City of Sydney Council did not make the request, and before 7 o'clock the Assistant Commissioner said it was his interpretation of state laws that were being breached that got him to move them on. The City of Sydney did not make the request.
I think they're going outside their limit. I'm not a legal expert, but in Australia we have a right to protest, and I think a lot of people would have. It's fantastic that these young ones lead the way. I'm a professional businessman, and I'm amazed that finally we've got people that stand up, and that particularly these young ones, and are prepared to make a protest.
Okay, Ian, thank you very much. Noel from East Ryde, what would you like to say?
I think that it's totally unreasonable for the police to have moved in like this. I don't think that
They'd been there for 8 days beyond their permission having expired.
Peaceful civil protest in Australia should not depend upon police authority, and the Summary Offences Act is a polite fiction to maintain some communications between protesters and police, as I understand it. In this case, the police didn't have the backing of the city council. They decided to move in. It was totally unnecessary. It's created confrontation.
So hypothetically, Noel, if there'd been, say, 500 of them and they stayed there 6 months in the middle of Martin Place, would you be happy with that?
Well, I would answer that if it happened. At the moment, we had a very small protest that was gradually dwindling, very committed, idealistic young people, totally unnecessary for the police to move in such a heavy-handed way, and it's just not a democratic society. In fact, it smacks again of us going back to the condition this society was in with the Vietnam war protests, and I don't like it.
Thanks a lot for your call, Noel. Thanks for making your thoughts known this morning. 1300 222 702 is our number.
Go to the 702 website, pick a presenter, find their favourite food and create a dream meal in 25 words or less. 5 lucky listeners will have 5 double passes to one of the tastiest lunches ever staged in Sydney.